Everyone, and welcome to Trade and Tariff Tuesdays. We're back with another edition of Avalara's webinar series discussing the Trump administration's tariffs and their impact on trade compliance. If this is your first time, welcome. And if you joined us before, welcome back. My name is Jasmine O'Cutesy, and I'll be your host today. Before we dive in, just a couple housekeeping. We'll start with a disclaimer that Avalara cannot provide legal or tax advice. On your screen is our safe harbor policy. Please take a moment to review. We're recording today's event, so if you want to listen again or share it with a colleague, you'll receive the recording within 24 hours. The console you're looking at can be customized, so feel free to move or resize the windows. The additional resource section contains a slide deck and other related links. There are several ways to engage with presenters and attendees today. First, please submit your questions using the Ask a Questions box. Feel free to submit any troubleshooting questions there and we'll be able to help you out. Second, you can join our attendee chat at the bottom of your screen, so feel free to introduce yourself, network, and discuss today's topic there. And as a friendly reminder, this session is intended to be interactive and responsive and not eligible for CPE credit. Trade and Tariff Tuesdays has moved to bi-weekly, so be sure to check out our upcoming dates and register at the link in the console. We have some exciting news that Avalara is hosting an A-list series of one-day events for our top customers and prospects, where we'll be visiting 20 cities between now and the end of the year. Enjoy action-packed games and swag that won't end up in your donation pile. We'll have a full-on tiki party complete with margaritas to network and connect with other VIPs. We'll talk some business, but it'll be light content with some useful insights, so you won't have to sit through endless presentations before all the fun. So register in your city by clicking the link in your post-webinar follow-up email. All right, let's meet your presenters for today's discussion. We are joined by by Shane Bogdan, the Director of Sales of Cross Border. So Shane, do you want to take it on from here? Introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Jasmine, and thanks everybody for joining. It's been a packed week of some updates. We are going to have this as an abridged session today, probably around 30 minutes or so. As you can tell, Patrick and Craig are not with me. They are currently traveling internationally, and I am currently at the SEMA conference in Las Vegas. If you are in town for that, please stop by booth 11674 in the North Hall. It'd be great to meet you in person, discuss all things tariff and trade, etc. So please stop by. But due to the amount of folks on here to support, we'll also have any sort of questions answered separately outside of this session. We'll provide any sort of responses directly back to you. So still feel free to put those in, and then we will answer those separately on that front. And I will also call out just the A-list event that Jasmine had mentioned previously. Yes, this is swag that we're providing that's not going to end up, in your closet. We've had tremendous feedback on our A-list events that are happening across the country. So absolutely check out what dates and what cities we're coming to you. Really, really fantastic events to get out of the office on an afternoon. Hit some balls, have some cocktails, and talk all things compliance. So with that said, I'll go into the agenda here. For those of you that have been following us since back in February, we'll go through the latest news and trade compliance implications to your business and how to take action with Avalara. But one of the first things we always kick it off with was a poll question one here. And this one is on most recently over the past 48 hours of how much will the U.S. lower the Chinese fentanyl-related tariff. So I'll go to this piece here. So A, 0, B, 10, C, 15, or D, 30 percentage points. So I'll give folks on the line here a second to answer these pieces. All right, let's see what's everybody put together here. If we could see some results. I don't see the result. Jasmine, are the results coming in on your end?
No, I don't see them either. Let's go back a couple slides and maybe it'll pop up again. Here we go. So if you didn't get an opportunity to answer, it should pop up again on your screen here.
And let's see. All right, I'm going to keep this going. Okay, so the majority speaks 10 percentage points, and that is absolutely correct. There was a reduction in 10% on the fentanyl-related tariffs, which were previously at 20%, outside of the standard IEEPA reciprocal tariff, which was additional 10%. So that is really bringing the average duty rate for tariff rate for goods from China to the U.S., country of origin China, down from around 57% down to around 47%. And yes, I saw, is it revised the fentanyl tariff still stacked? Yes, it is. So I said I wasn't going to answer questions, but happy to chime in on that one. So let's go into the latest in terms of what's happening. We'll stay on the theme of China here. China's been the first, one of three of the countries, Canada, Mexico, and China, one of the main three in the crosshairs of really the trade whiplash that we've been talking about since the beginning of February. And here what had happened is some pretty solid negotiations between the U.S. and China and Korea last week. So we'll go into finer details on this on a separate slide here, but the U.S. will lower that 10%. It is going to maintain its suspension on some of the 301s that were exempt, which a lot of manufacturers have been proponents for on those pieces. So that's going to continue. And then the U.S. is also going to see some benefits on the Chinese side that we'll go into, such as releasing and purchasing soybeans, removing additional tariffs on the U.S., et cetera. So more to come on that in a couple slides. Canada is back in the crosshairs again, although they have a 35% tariff rate currently right now. They are feeling some heat from the U.S. just based upon a recent advertisement that they put out. I believe it was across the province of Ontario. It was in relation to Ronald Reagan speaking about tariffs and his displeasure of those. So this didn't sit well with the administration, and there had been some previous threats that last week that the administration would raise the 35% on it with an additional 10%. Now, that is yet to come to fruition at this point. I know Scott Passett was doing some interviews over the weekend, and he was being asked in terms of what was happening. He didn't give any sort of clarity or confirmation on that, if that additional 10% is going to come into play, just that the administration is displeased in terms of what had happened with that advertisement. But it does sound like Mark Carney has apologized to the administration, but we're hearing that all negotiations are currently off between the U.S. and Canada. So obviously more to come here, but China, Canada, two of the three main crosshairs since the beginning of February. And the other one that's looming really around the corner is in relation to the IEEPA Supreme Court decision. So if you've been following us back really since May, we'll give a timeline of what's happened with this court case. This is going to come to a head really tomorrow. The oral arguments are going to happen, and the decision is going to be made between now in December in terms of what's set to play. And really that whole piece is in relation to, does the administration have the authority to regulate importation by means of tariffs on here? So this is really going to be a hot topic point here. So more to come on that, and we'll dive into that a little bit more in a second. So as we always do, we're just putting a map up here just in relation to some of the trade deals and deal frameworks that are out there. I mentioned previously Canada at the 35%. Mexico remains at 25%, although a proposed 30% has been delayed. They are currently sitting in a 90-day period. One new one that has come up, if you've been reading the news, is in relation to Brazil. There was some bipartisan support that happened in the House of Representatives to basically remove the additional 40% tariffs on Brazil. So they have the 10% and then additional 40%, equating to around 50%. Well, basically that passed the House, but due to how it's controlled politically, that will not advance any further than that. I think the goal here was to really show that there is starting to see some bipartisan support across both aisles in terms of questioning some of these tariffs and what authority is in play, and are these impactful to the larger economy as a whole. One stat I like to bring up is just in relation to beef. Brazil is one of the United States' largest importers of Brazilian beef. A lot of these tariffs are all stackable. So the actual tariff rate on Brazilian beef importing to the United States is actually around 76%. So if you go down to your supermarket aisles and take a look at what the price of a a steak is these days, you can absolutely see how the price of beef has gone up on that front. But again, it's interesting to see now how both sides of the aisle are also starting to look to see if should they keep some of these tariffs in play, or should some of these be questioning across the board here? A couple other ones that we don't have on here that have been solidified over the past 2 weeks is Malaysia and Cambodia. They removed tariffs on the U.S. And both are now down to a 19% tariff rate for goods coming into the United States. And as always, you can leverage all of our blogs, all of our tariff content. We are keeping all of our content up to date in terms of what is happening in terms of the latest rates across all of the markets and countries in terms of what's happening on what we're calling the tariff and trade whiplash here. So back to one of the main pieces that's happened over the past week is in relation to the key actions between the U.S. and China. And, again, China was one of the three in the crosshairs at the beginning of this. We saw the U.S. Institute tariffs that went all the way up to 145%, I believe, back in May and June, and then they whittled their way down through additional negotiations on here. So there have been some large actions that have taken place over the past 48 hours. These are all going to come into play starting November 10th next week. So I'll start just with the key actions on the U.S. right now. So the U.S., there is going to reduce 10% reduction on that fentanyl, which is currently 20%. They're going to reduce it down to 10% on those. There's going to be additional Section 301 relief. They're extending exclusions for some key industrial inputs to November 2026. Now, this was actually going to expire on November 29th of this year. I know a lot of manufacturers out there were specifically asking for further extensions on these. These, I believe, related to about 178 products, primarily in the realm of industrial machinery, printing machinery, purifying machinery, but again, in that realm of industrial machinery. So those pieces and those 178 products will see the Section 301 relief. They will not be impacted as they're not right now. That extension is going to continue on those specific products. Then there's additional export control pauses on the 50% rule based upon ownership and affiliation with an overseas company. And then there's also the shipping tariff. So there had been talk a lot around putting Section 301 fees on Chinese-built ships. That is now also going into pause here. I know that was sending some ripple effects in terms of some spot rates and also any sort of supply chain disruption if there was going to be additional fees on any sort of logistics procedures on those, and also monitoring which ships are Chinese built and which ones are not. Now, the key actions by China here, they are basically suspending all retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods and companies. They're pausing the implementation of some of the rare earth export restrictions. If you have been following us, there has been this kind of tit for tat in relation to chips and rare earths. So chips and magnets, as we've been calling it. So obviously, China was keen on getting United States chips, and the U.S. was keen on getting rare earths to help create and make these. So this is a good progress here in terms of China releasing the rare earths export restrictions on these to help with any sort of manufacturing and importation on those specific goods. They are lifting sanctions on specific shipping entities. There was also Nexperio kind of also got in the crossfires, which was a Netherlands company, also manufacturing out of China. Those chips are going to be able to be sold outside of China and shipped outside of China. Then the purchases, I mean, this was huge with the agricultural market. You've probably seen the soybeans. So over the next 2 months, China has committed to purchasing and exporting soybeans from United States farmers over the next 2 months here and across into 2028. Additional exclusions through 2026 and additional retaliatory relief on some of the anti-monopoly investigations. Some of these were getting finer into the weeds as part of the negotiations, but definitely wanted to call them out here. So again, this is probably the most progress. This is the most progress we've seen between the U.S. and China since the beginning of February, when all of this started to come into play between China, Canada, and Mexico here. So what does this really mean from importers and exporters? Obviously, we have some short-term relief here over the next 12 to 18 months. So absolutely expecting the flow specifically of chips, soybeans, and rare earths to start coming into play here. Supply chain flexibility. I did see the other day the spot rate on a ship from Shanghai to the port of LA around $2,800. If you remember back in June when we were giving these and the tariffs were going up, the spot rate on those was over $6,000. So the supply chain definitely going to have some flexibility in there, and also hopefully some cost relief on any sort of spot rates. Compliance watches, upcoming tariff exclusions and renewals for these changes. So everybody's going to really be monitoring these things that they're staying in play, what's going to be renewed, what's not going to be renewed. And then obviously taking all of this into consideration and really strategically planning your supply chain based around this 12 to 18 month period. Again, what we've seen over the past 9 months as part of the whole whiplash that we've called, we've seen rates go up and down, and that's impacted the whole supply chain as a whole, just because they've been 30, 60, 90-day periods. Now we're actually looking at a 12 to 18 month period. So it'll be interesting to see what starts happening, if that's going to really push on the front end, mid, or if it's going to be spread evenly across over the next 12 to 18 months. One thing we always like to bring up is in relation to de minimis. If you haven't been following us, de minimis is a key and critical piece that's been part of this whole discussion around IEEPA tariffs and global cross-border compliance as a whole. Just a quick refresher on de minimis. De minimis is the threshold at which goods can be imported into a country and deemed duty-free. So the United States previously had one of the highest de minimis rates of any market out there at $800. Well, back in May, they pulled it back and said any sort of goods coming in from China and Hong Kong, any of those parcels valued under $800 will now be assessed duties. And then fast forward to August 29th, they removed it from all other countries as well. Primarily reason here is going back to the theme of fentanyl and illicit shipping on here. So the chart here on the left, specifically coming from the CBP, in 2015, there were 125 million imports of goods that were deemed under de minimis, under that $800 value, so not receiving that duty. Fast forward to 2024, that rate went up to 1.36 billion, so over 10x the value of 10x the volume that was happening in those prior years. So currently, this is creating some ripples across, because anything that's coming into the United States under $800, previously didn't. For a consumer, that was pretty great. 60% of those parcels were actually coming in from China. So we've actually seen a significant decrease in the volume of de minimis parcels. One of the latest stats that I saw was, previously there were about 4 million parcels under de minimis entering the U.S. on a daily basis. They're now seeing around less than 1 million parcels entering on a daily basis. So over 75% decrease in the volume of these de minimis parcels entering in the United States. And here's just a little bit of some insight here on that. A majority of those parcels used to fall under Section 321, again, deeming themselves duty-free, tariff-free on those pieces, and they'd enter through Type 86. Now, if they're going through any sort of means of any sort of international postal carrier, they've now been required to basically calculate, collect, and remit those duty costs and fill out paperwork if they were to then import those in the United States. Now, this has caused concern with the UPU. There's 176 postal agencies within the UPU. 88 of those postal agencies have suspended shipments internationally to the U.S. due to the complications of calculating, collecting, and remitting those duty funds in the United States. So, these are things that Avalara can help out with in terms of calculating those duties, working with partners to collect those and also remit those, but also understanding the HS codes on these pieces. So please keep that in mind as we go through here. But obviously the volume coming in the United States under de minimis continues to wane now that these goods under $800 are dutiable. Now, the second hot topic really that's hit this week, and everybody's been following this in relation to the IEEPA tariffs. And again, the IEEPA tariffs are really what the administration has put into play as they've been putting these tariff rates, these blanket tariff rates across a variety of markets, including Canada, China, Mexico, as well as all of the other ones that came into play as part of the Rose Garden April 2nd announcement at the White House. So on May 29th, there was a Court of International Trade ruling where U.S. manufacturer came into play and basically said, hey, these are hurting us. And does the U.S. have authority to does the administration have authority to basically put these into play without going through specific governmental agencies like the Department of Trade, Department of Commerce, et cetera? You'll hear the Section 301 duties, you'll hear Section 232 duties. All of those duties and all of those peace trade measures have to go through a formalized process. These IEEPA tariffs, though, did not go through any sort of formalized process. They were basically just blanketed across and announced by the administration. So basically, Court of International Trade gives a ruling saying, no, the administration does not have that authority. It then goes through the Federal Court Circuit of Appeals. It gets appealed and gets put on pause, stating that the IEEPA tariffs continue to remain in play while it's being reviewed. It then goes in front of a federal circuit ruling, which was one of the most recent ones. They basically stated that the administration did lack authority, but stayed the enforcement until basically October 14th, pending the Supreme Court appeal. So simplifying that, the IEEPA tariffs are still in play, although they've basically been ruled through various court rulings that the administration doesn't have the authority here. So the Supreme Court then the administration then put the Supreme Court appeal into play. Our timeline continues here. On October 20th, respondents' briefs were filed. There was a divided argument. More briefs were filed. Now the big piece here is on November 5th, which is set for the argument on here. And really, again, the focus of the case here is whether these IEEPA tariffs allows the administration to impose global tariffs by declaring a national emergency. So the key questions that are going to come up here is, does the phrase regulate importation authorize the uses of tariffs here? If yes, did Congress unconstitutionally delegate its power to tax and impose duties on all of these goods entering into the United States? Now, there's big pieces here in terms of stakes for importers. A ruling upholding this based upon the lower court's ruling, the Court of International Trade here, would basically say that these were unlawful, and it would trigger refunds on all the duties paid really since February 2025. Now, there's a lot of questions here. If these are overturned, how are these refunds going to come into play? These are hundreds of millions of dollars across millions of companies out there that they've paid on these. So again, a lot is at stake here. And then also, is it going to stay? And then if it does not, what is going to be the process in terms of getting those refunds into the hands of those organizations that have paid for those duties? So just the timeline moving forward, November 5th is when they'll hear the arguments. They're expecting some potential decision window between December and January. And then again, depending on the outcome here, CBP will have to do some refund processing or wind down these IEEPA tariffs to some capacity here. But a lot really is at stake here on these. There's also been some, back in June, I believe it was Lutnick that also stated that even if these tariffs do go away, the administration will find other avenues to put them back into play. From an interview he did with Fox News. So I expect that if these do get overturned, there are other potential avenues that maybe these fall under Section 232 or Section 301 or some other trade measures here. But it is definitely going to be very interesting to see these moving over the past 9 months, what will happen moving forward here. So implications to your business. This is always a piece that we always call really the four horsemen of cross-border trade here. And really it goes into our theme of how do you stay proactive versus being reactive over this trade whiplash environment. We talked about the de minimis exceptions. You need to understand if you're importing into specific markets, what are those de minimis exceptions? What are those de minimis thresholds and ceilings at which those parcels, those goods importing into those markets are going to be dutiable. Country of origin's never been more important. Obviously, with the U.S., all of the duty rates, tariff rates, et cetera, are all based upon the country of origin. So where substantial transformation has taken place on those goods. You've seen a lot, probably around a 40% penalty in relation to transshipments. Really, this is all about ensuring that the U.S. monitoring and ensuring that goods, if they're coming from a higher dutiable country, are not going through another country and being relabeled or fraudulently saying that they're going through a lower duty rate country. But you need to understand country of origin, as this is imperative, as it ultimately dictates the tariff rate on your goods. Tariff code classification, we call this the Rosetta Stone of cross-border trade. Every good has the same first 6 digits. Basically, they are unique item identifiers on goods. The last 4 digits, the last 2 to 6 digits actually, dictate what that tariff rate is going to be and what sort of regulations are going to be on that specific good. Now, you put all of these together and then you apply it to the declared value of a specific good, and that will get you the monetary value of what that good specifically is. But again, these are all critical pieces of trade and information that you should be capturing for all specific items and goods that you're doing any sort of cross-border trade with. Some news that's been happening on this front. We always like to give some snippets of some other news stories from an economic standpoint of what we're seeing in the news. It looked like tariffs in Halloween. It looked around about a $2 annual price increase here from some Halloween candy. It looks like that could potentially be really stemming from some of the cocoa tariffs that had been ranging from about 10 to 32%. I mentioned previously there's the whole global postal fallout. This is, again, in relation to the de minimis discussion that we've been having here and the removal of it. U.S. mail shipments have dropped around 70% after ending the de minimis. And again, out of that 176 UPU, Universal Postal Union, postal entities, about 88 of those have suspended some postal services into the U.S. And then there's been some additional disputes around the realm of auto trade. Canada has launched some proceedings on Stellantis after it moved some Jeep manufacturing production from its Ontario facility into the United States. So more to come here. Unfortunately, that definitely continues to impact the trade and negotiations that Canada and U.S. are having at the moment. So again, talking about how do you be more proactive versus reactive. Here are some ways to help build that resilient supply chain strategy. Obviously, exploring diversification of shipping carriers and sources of supply, looking at country of origin, understanding which countries have higher duty rates based upon their country of origin versus others. How does that then impact the cost of shipping into the United States or other markets that you are manufacturing and exporting to? Automating global trade compliance. You don't have to do these alone. I know previously there had been a lot of pride in doing a lot of trade compliance manually, by hand, et cetera. We've gotten to an environment now that things need to be automated in parallel with any sort of manual work. There are several tools out there, even that Avalara can provide you with, to help automate these pieces, keeping you up to speed in terms of regulations, tariff code changes, duty rates, helping you be more proactive on this front. We always also state you need to make sure that you're working with a customs broker, a trade attorney on a lot of these pieces. Again, country of origin and understanding the interpretation of country of origin, we're seeing now being a hot topic of, if you are manufacturing a good in one market, but it has components from a variety of other markets, well, what really is the country of origin of that good? That is probably the number one topic right now in terms of trade attorneys, of understanding what specifically is the country of origin of said deemed good. Ensuring your product details are compliant. Again, going back to that 4 horsemen of cross-border trade that we mentioned, understanding de minimis, understanding country of origin, understanding your HS classification codes, and understanding your declared value, and building inventory to absorb these short-term headwinds. I would assume that we're going to start seeing some influx of goods over the next 12 months coming in from China into the U.S. based upon some of this reprieve that we are seeing coming out of this November 10th framework with China on these fronts. So poll question 2 here again, we've been asking this since the beginning. Are you planning to adjust your supply chain due to impending global supply chain changes? We have a variety of options here. I will say from February to June, we've had a lot that have basically stated, I don't know yet. And over the past week since then, we should actually probably put on our next session, show what the trend has been, moving more into diversifying suppliers and manufacturers, rethinking local distribution. So I'll give everybody here a second to put their own answers in. All right, let's see here. Yeah, so we are continuing to see that uptick of, I don't know yet, was in the 60% range back in the first half of this year. It's amazing to see this now, a majority going to switching to local suppliers and diversifying suppliers and manufacturers. So great to see, and also goes into the key theme of how do we be more proactive on these pieces rather than wait and be reactive. What are your plans for addressing the increased costs from global tariffs on your goods? We've been seeing I'll let everybody chime in here. We have been seeing a very steady set of answers here on this one. I won't spoil it, but I'll let everybody take a second to answer this one right here. Okay. 80% passing additional costs to the consumer, or raising costs. We are absolutely seeing that. It's amazing here that it's very cut and dry. 80% passing them to the customer by raising prices, 20% by absorbing the tariff costs. Okay, this is interesting about the absorbing the tariff cost piece, because that's probably one of our highest that we've seen. Normally we see some around the including a tariff surcharge. So very interesting split here. But again, majority is going to be passing these on to the consumers to some degree. So we'll continue to ask everybody here on that moving forward. Again, how is your business keeping up with these changes? Listen, as you can see here, there's penalties and fines for non-compliance if you're following the CBP on social media, which I've never would have expected to see them have such a large social presence on the likes of LinkedIn, et cetera. They are always putting up new pieces in terms of how they are ensuring that and enforcing compliance, and going after other organizations that they're seeing fraudulent, either transshipping or misclassifying goods. So you want to make sure you're not doing that. You want to make sure you're not overcharging, undercharging customs duties or import taxes. And then that all adds up to additional costs and fees from your supply chain. Again, if you're importing from one market, how do you ensure that if that tariff rate goes up, how does that impact the ripple effect across the rest of your goods? So you're not alone. We've had this stat up since, I believe, last October of 55% said cross-border trade is one of the most challenging environments. We're going to be rerunning that stat, so you won't have to see this 55% anymore. But I can assume that 55% is completely out the window, and we're probably going to get more likely in the likely range of around 95% plus here. So more to come. And as always, we want to make sure that you're aware that how Avalara can help on this front. And if you think of us, we've been in the compliance space for the past 20 years. With cross-border, it has been no different. Think about us, though, in 3 C's: calculation of duties. So understanding what goods you have, what's the country of origin, what are those duty rates going to be more proactive on those pieces. Classifications, tariff code classifications, again, one of the 4 horsemen of cross-border trade here. We have a variety of tools and services, from self-serve tools for you to look up specific goods, to a team of 250 individuals that will go through your catalog with the highest level of accuracy and provide classification, to automated AI approaches here to look at your catalog and classify goods. And the last C here is content. Understanding, are there specific flags on your goods that are entering into the US or other markets? Are there PGA flags? Are there anti-dumping, countervailing duties on those goods, et cetera? We can help out with all of these pieces across the board here, either together or through ad hoc measures. So do not hesitate to reach out to us on this front. We continue to offer a 14-day free trial for our self-serve classification. So if you would like to have be provision of 14-day classification. We normally do it on the following Monday. Just select yes here, and we can provision that to you. I'll give everybody a second. And lastly, would you like to speak with somebody about, cross-border trade, chat in terms of what's happening in the current market and how we can potentially assist? We will get back to you within 24 hours on this. If you would like to speak to an expert, just select yes here. Okay. And lastly, just want to make sure everybody is aware that we do have a plethora of resources on cross-border, up to speed. All of our blogs that we've been putting out since the beginning of February, they all have been updated every time that there's been a key trade change. So all of these have been updated as of yesterday as well, with everything that's been happening on the IEEPA case, all of the China trade negotiations, changes with Malaysia, Cambodia, etc. All of these are updated and continue to remain updated as a source of truth for your team here and resources. So you're not scouring the internet on these. We have a team here that's specifically on these pieces. So with that said, I'm sorry I can't answer any questions right now just due to timing. We will have our team take a look and try to get back to you as soon as possible on those. But Jasmine, in the meantime, any closing remarks here, any reminders to the group?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to let the audience today know that we're working on a couple more webinars in November. And so be sure to check the website here in the next couple days and you'll be able to register for those. I believe the dates are November 12th and November 19th. So we'll be sure to get those posted on the website soon. And then just thank you for everybody attending today. We appreciate your time, and thank you, Shane, for your time as well. I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks everyone for continuing to stay with us here. Have a great day.